Welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. Joining us now for World Brief and a review of some of the headlines of today's newspaper from around the world is Adefemi Akinsoya. Femi, how are you? Hola, Femi Femu, where you at? Oh, from Dubai.
Good morning, Adefemi.
Morning, Femi.
Can you hear us?
I'm not sure.
Oh, unfortunately, you can't hear us. Okay, Adefemi can't hear us. It's her mom's birthday, don't forget.
Oh, yeah.
So it's happy birthday to your mom, Adefemi.
Yeah.
All right, we'll just go straight to World Brief this morning. Hopefully, Adefemi can join us in the course of the show. If not, then we will see her again on Monday. Israel and Hamas signed the U.S. broker deal to implement the first phase of a ceasefire in Gaza, including the release of hostages and withdrawal of Israeli troops. The agreement's ratification triggered a timeline. Within 24 hours, hostilities should pause. Within 72 hours, living hostages exchanged and returns of remains of the deceased. But key unresolved issues remain. When does the disarmament of Hamas begin? Governance in Gaza, territorial boundaries, reconstruction, and long-term security arrangements all are yet to be agreed upon. Rufai, I'm sure you have a number of things to say about this with regards to, Hamas, the Israel-Hamas deal.
Yeah.
It's a win, at least in the first instance for President Donald Trump and his desire for that Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
But before you speak on these matters, let me bring all the stories together so we can fully dissect them. Letitia James, a prominent Democrat and vocal critic of Donald Trump, was indicted by a federal grand jury on charges of mortgage fraud and making false statements tied to a Virginia property. The indictment alleges she mischaracterized a property in Norfolk, VA, as a secondary residence to obtain favorable mortgage terms while allegedly renting it out. James and her supporters accused the charges of being politically motivated, part of a pattern of retribution against Trump's critics. The case is being prosecuted in the Eastern District of Virginia by the U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, a Trump loyalist, adding to the political stakes. She is scheduled to appear in court on October 24. Now, going over to Asia, where at least 20 children, all under the age of 5, have died in central India after consuming contaminated cough syrup. Multiple reports suggest that Tamil Nadu-based company Stresan Pharmaceuticals cold reef syrup contained toxic diethylene glycol in quantities nearly 500 times the permissible limit. Following the deaths, the owner of Stresan Pharmaceuticals, S. Ranganathan, has since been arrested. Very sad news. And Rufai, this talks about lack of regulation, lack of oversight in Southeast Asia. So it's quite sad to hear that. And I think it's important for people to take note of that name. Cold reef syrups, because they have been concerned by World Health Organization that it might pass through to other countries that have unregulated ways of bringing in medicines like this, and especially because it affects young children under the age of 5. Your take on these stories this morning?
So a couple of things. Let me start with Israel at first. See, rather than people celebrating and trying to put their hands in the air for Trump, see, this is the truth. It's not the first time we're going to have a deal like this. When the war first started in 2023, as at November, Joe Biden had the first deal that led to some sort of like a pause in fighting, and there were hostage swaps. The second deal came later in the year 2024. There's sort of like a pause again and more hostage swaps. Joe Biden put forward a deal around May 2024 that showed most of the things, in fact, Trump wanted to do now. Ceasefire, release more hostage, the path to Gaza's future. But Joe Biden's plan was that it was going to be run by the Palestinian, unlike Trump's Board of Peace plan that he wants Tony Blair to run that region, which Hamas is already rejecting. As at that time, Netanyahu rejected it because he still wanted to fight and have an upper hand. Now that he feels he's done fighting, that he's got an upper hand now, that's why they've pushed forward this plan. So this idea of that Biden didn't do anything, no. In fact, as at the time that President Trump came in, Joe Biden still executed a plan as at the January 15 that called for a pause in fighting until Israel broke it as a March this year, when fighting and hostilities continued again. The question we should ask is, it is Israel that is always breaking all this plan. After the Oslo talks, Oslo 1, Oslo 2, that you had Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat and the won Nobel Prize, it was the Israel that went ahead, breaking all of this and encroaching on land. So the guarantee needs to come from Netanyahu. I know Netanyahu is playing this politics because he wants to get his hostages back so that he will look favorable in the eyes of the Israeli people. But we should also look at the future of people of Gaza. And I don't think I support totally that board of peace that is saying that Tony Blair and Trump and the like should run it, and you are giving Palestinians less impact on it. What you should do is have a future, let the likes of Fatah run Gaza also, all right? And let's have harmonious, united Palestinian nation. The truth is, and amidst it in an atmosphere of a two-state solution, the truth has to be said. Israel today that is hammering Hamas. This same Israel used to fund Hamas in the 80s and 90s when Hamas started to be able to fight against the PLO as at that point in time. So let's just get all this, facts right. And as regards Trump, we are not surprised. That's how he demonizes his opponents. But is anybody surprised? Because this was the same thing Trump talked about in his Heritage Foundation Project 2025. And these were the things that they were going to do, demonize people. Our offense was that after 2 years painstaking investigation, they indicted Trump's organization for fraud, which he did commit. So that's the truth Trump doesn't want to stand. Now he's going after her, citing property. That's just like what they did for the woman on Federal Reserves. So Trump should continue his hypocrisy. But she said something. She said, no weapon fashioned against me shall prosper. And she shows she's a strong woman of faith.
Yeah. Well, the weapon fashioned against her is very deep. Just before I take on national newspaper headlines, local and international, the weapon formed against her, if found guilty, is steep. Yeah. The maximum sentence, based on the 2 counts against her, would be 6 years imprisonment, even though, usually district court judges don't go for that option. But then there would be the fine of $1 million or a forfeiture of assets. Beyond that is even to her professional, life, where she could lose her position as Attorney General and even lose her license as a lawyer. So the stakes are really high. She has to go to court and defend herself. But even bigger, like you mentioned, the conversation is who's next on this political witch hunt. Isn't it interesting that? And it just goes to show that anywhere in the part of the world, depending on who the leader is, and this is why leadership is critical, we can use organs of government that are meant to fight against and go against people who are criminals to fight political enemies, especially when they come after you. And this is what's playing out in America. And so the next question is, if you go against Trump, he's going after you using a political witch hunt, as it were. But witch hunt or not, if she's found guilty, she's going to face the full wrath of the law. Now, going on to India, like I said, it's very sad, but I think even now, more importantly, is an opportunity for the regulatory sector in health in India to fix up and look sharp. All eyes on them right now, how 20 children could have died. The unfortunate thing is that Ragnathan, who is the owner of this Resson Pharmaceuticals company, is 73 years old, and he has quite a reputation in the pharmaceutical circles, having produced medicines over the years. He's now been arrested, and if found guilty of negligence, will face jail time, especially because of the fact that children have had to die as a result of these drugs. I think even more importantly for medicines is border control, because what they don't want is for these medicines to now cross borders to other countries. It's often said, and quite sadly so, that Africa is sometimes a dumping ground for medicines like this, because it's a cheaper alternative, because it's readily available. And so what we're hoping is that the red flag has now been raised, and parents will be cautious, parents and guardians, and ensure that whatever medicine is given to the children, due diligence is done, and that our own NAFDAC regulatory authority would look into it and ensure that drugs that come into Nigeria are, meets the minimum standards and are not adulterated. But we'll follow up on this case and see indeed whether or not what would happen to Ragnathan. His company has been shut down, his license revoked already, but it now determines whether or not he's complicit, and he was very aware of what his company was producing. All right, let's move on now to news headlines across the globe, shall we? We begin in Nigeria with This Day newspaper, newspaper of record. This day has the headline, President Bola Tinubu nominating Professor Joash Ojo Amupiton as the new chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission. The appointment was ratified by the National Council of States unanimously, even though some people were absent. His name will now be forwarded to the Senate for screening and confirmation. Amupiton hails from Kogi State and is a professor of law at the University of Jos. This day also reports the FCT Police Command. With regards to Amupiton, I will come to that. We already spoke about that quite, in detail earlier today. Another story on the front cover of this day newspaper confirming the arrest of 12 suspects in connection with the attack and demise of our dear colleague Somto Chukwumaduagu and his security guard Barnabas Danlami in an apartment in Abuja. Among the arrested suspects are individuals from Katsina State, Kaduna, and Borno states. Rufai, you might want to even talk about the effect of banditry, terrorism, crime in these areas and how it's spiraling, into other crimes such as armed robbery and unfortunate killings of people in the state capital. Now, let's move over to the Punch newspaper, which reports President Tinubu has granted presidential pardons to prominent figures such as Herbert Macaulay, Major General Maman Vatsa, and former lawmaker Farouk Lawan. In fact, a total of 175 persons are benefiting from clemency. Some of the pardons are posthumous and others include sentence reductions, commutations, or full pardons for living convicts deemed to have shown remorse or rehabilitation. And again, at the same time, at the National Council of States, they approved a new national honors list of 959 individuals, and they are to be recognized for contributions in various fields. These lists include Bill Gates for public health and humanitarian work, Sam Amuka Pemo, journalism, definitely want to applaud in that one, Mahmoud Yakubu, the former INEC chairman, when his leave of absence was announced, it actually said the president had given him a CON, and also members of the Ogoni Nine. We'll move over to the New Telegraph newspaper, which has as its headline, on its front page, the Nigeria Police Force temporarily suspending the enforcement of the Motor Vehicles Prohibition of Tinted Glass Act of 1991. This came after a meeting between the Inspector General of Police and the Nigerian Bar Association. Though there is a court case underway, the police decision is somewhat proactive. They are suspending enforcement in good faith, citing public interest as many motorists had complained about harassment, extortion, especially at police checkpoints, related to tinted windows or demand for the tinted permits. All right, let's move on now to the Vanguard newspaper. We have there on the front page, student hostels across Nigeria are in crisis, raising an alarm on that one, saying persistent overcrowding and rising, this is the Vanguard newspaper now, rising accommodation costs are forcing many into substandard off-campus housing, leaving parents and students in distress. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has launched a probe into over $18 billion spent on the rehabilitation of the country's major refineries. We talked about that this morning as well. But Harcourt, Warri, and Kaduna questioning why these plants remain mostly dormant despite the heavy investment. I know the Punch newspaper also has a report on that. Also, it's World Mental Health Day today, and we move over to the Guardian newspaper, which reports that despite rising need, over 40 million Nigerians suffer mental disorders, yet 85% lack access to care. With fewer than 200 psychiatrists nationwide, experts are now urging full implementation of the Mental Health Act and better integration of mental health services into primary health care. Yesterday, Dr. Batu was talking about evaluation of mental health, even for those who are going to get married, with the case of domestic violence, the femicide, and even killing of spouses in marriages. Now let's go over to the Daily Independent, which reports the Citizens Advocacy for Social and Economic Rights has formally urged the Enugu State Attorney General to prosecute former Minister Jeffrey Uche Naji over alleged forgery of his university and NYSC certificates. KESA says federal agencies have dragged their feet, and if the Enugu Attorney General fails to act, the organization wants private citizens granted the power to take up the case. I did say yesterday that it's not going away anytime soon. Jeffrey Naji is definitely going to be in the news. Yesterday we had the NBA and a few other prominent people speak about him and talk about the importance of prosecution if found guilty. Now, finally, to UK papers, the Daily Express, the Independent, and the Daily Mirror all capture the same message. peace at last. After 2 years of relentless conflict, a U.S.-brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hamas has brought relief, tears, and cautious optimism, we must add, offering Gaza a fragile but welcome hope of peace.
Real
and
quickly,
these are the stories.
As regards Jeffrey Naji, if we want a nation of integrity, we must put our foot on the ground. Let's not make it about tribe or anything.
Yeah.
If he's found wanting for forgery, he should be prosecuted, pure and simple.
Simple.
All
That's
right?
in addition to all the other voices that have come up to say.
Let's not make it, and let's not try to politicize it.
Absolutely.